This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Benefits Buzz, a WEX podcast. In today's episode, we delve into crafting employee benefits enrollment strategies for open enrollment. And joining us is Shannon Hernandez, Manager of Client Services at WEX. We'll discuss practical steps to pinpoint employee needs, streamline the enrollment process, and improve communication. Welcome, Shannon. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Nathan. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I can't believe it, but open enrollment is right around the corner and will be here before we know it. So we really want to try to help our employers prepare. That being said, I want to know right off the bat, could you share why it's so critical for human resources to establish specific goals around the employee experience during open enrollment?
Sure. And that's such a great opening question here, because setting goals sets the tone to how the open enrollment period is going to go. So it boosts engagement, improves the enrollment experience, streamlines the process, and it can provide you with true measurable successes. So by focusing on setting good goals, the HR team can create a more effective and positive benefits open enrollment experience for their employees. And that ultimately contributes to higher engagement, satisfaction, and organizational success.
Who doesn't love that stuff? Am I right?
Right?
100%.
Yes.
I love that. Goals. We're a great theme. And I love it. We have this to be, because sometimes I think I'm speaking because I watch a lot of HR pros during open enrollment and their heads are on a swivel and there's steam coming out of their ears. And so sometimes they get, it's really easy to slip into the chaos of OE, right? And so I love us this episode taking a step back and talking about goals and having really good strategy and being pragmatic about that. And so, Shannon, I'd love to start again, kind of building on kind of your explanation is what are some of the key components around goal building? What are some of the foundational things that you look to when you should start to develop your goals?
Yeah, there's so many layers that go into preparing a successful open enrollment, and it all starts around this time. So it's a perfect time for us to have this discussion. You want to set up your OE date for sure. Communications is another key component, and that's not just the communications that's going into your benefits guide. I mean, the communications out to your employees that's getting that engagement, that's announcing open enrollment and preparing them for the changes that are to come, especially if it's an active enrollment. And then working with your benefit admin partners to determine what the timeline needs to be. I would also say factor in internal approval processes. There's a lot of organizations where if you have rate changes, carrier changes, even plan design changes, all of those need to go through an internal approval process. We'll factor that in when you're setting up your goals and your outline for the open enrollment season. But I think the most important piece that comes to my mind as an HR admin is again, that communication. Need to have time to send out materials on what's changing.
We hear a lot, Shannon, around SMART goals, and I'm really loving the fact that you've got some very specific things there as far as comms and dates, and you're looking to increase engagement. But what are some measurable objectives that companies might want to set for a smooth benefits enrollment?
Great question. Increase the enrollment participation. That would be one. Improve the awareness of the benefit offerings. Enhance wellness program participation. That's a big one these days. Boost online enrollments. You would be surprised how many companies are still trying to get their employees to go electronic versus completing a paper enrollment. And then just reducing errors, because let's be honest. I mean, a successful enrollment is not necessarily a perfect enrollment. So reduce those errors. We do what's called a rapid review after each open enrollment, where we have an opportunity to go through all the things that went well, all of those successes, those goals that were hit, and where we can improve next time. But as a Ben admin partner, we also like to host an OE kickoff call, and that's where we will hear all of those measurable goals that you want to achieve and talk through them and see how we can help achieve those.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that, Shannon. What do you hear as being the most common, measurable, achievable, specific goal that employers actually want to hit for their open enrollment period?
Normally, it's either increasing the enrollment participation. We're getting a lot more companies that are hosting active enrollments these days versus passive enrollments. And when it's an active enrollment, you really need to make sure that you have that employee engagement. So that would be, I think, the number one thing. And then second to that would be the awareness of the benefit options that are available, because there are so many companies, there's so many employees that you really don't know what you have. And you can have a really rich program set in front of you. But if you don't know, if there's no communication about it, if there's no, education around it, then you're really not going to get that participation that you're looking for.
So SMART goals are smart.
Exactly. Yes, they are.
I dig all those, and thanks for sharing. I love that you sit in a position where you're able to hear a bunch of different types of goals, and thanks for sharing that with our listeners. Right. I love the idea you can't measure success unless you have a measuring stick, right? And so providing those goals give you that ability to see, right? And then for those of you who are listening, who maybe haven't had some of those goals, this will be your first year. Then you can measure back on your improvement year after year. So don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball if you don't have some of those that you just heard set up. It's a great time to start thinking about those and getting those implemented. So thank you, Shannon. We are one of the things that we pride ourselves on the podcast is, and I love that we went right to the big thinking. What are goals? How should they be formulated? What are some examples? But I also want to bring us down to the granular level, right? We like to have actionable takeaways and really break things down. So Shannon, if you're thinking about someone's listening, okay, I want to create some goals, a couple of those maybe I've done in the past, maybe there's some new ones I want to try. Where in the world should people start? Like, what's the first thing, right? Sometimes that first step's the hardest step. So what would you recommend on like building out a goals plan? Where do we start, Shannon? Help us.
That's a great question. Set your OE date. Even if it's tentative, having a general idea of when you want to have your open enrollment plays such a key factor in having it be a successful one. It's critical. So start with setting your open enrollment date and then work your way backwards. What we like to do is send out friendly reminders to help set expectations early on, starting at a 90-day touch base period, and then going from 60 days, 30 days to the kickoff call. But if you set your open enrollment dates, work your way backwards, you're going to put yourself in a better position to ensuring that you're able to capture everything that's going to be needed for that time period and have a successful open enrollment.
It's great. It's just like, so I'm in the marketing world and we're marketing and talking to HR professionals all the time. And in the marketing world, we have a go-to-market date and everything works back from that plan. It looks like the exact same thing. EOD, is your open enrollment date that's your go live date, and you got to work backwards. And for some of those listeners, like, well, the date's already been chosen. Okay, well that's great. So now like, okay, let's start working backwards and start mapping that up.
Yes, absolutely.
Shannon, I have to ask a curiosity question, and I'm going to rely on your expertise because you have far more experience in this space than I ever will. But there are so many different benefits. There's so many different offerings that an employer can provide for employees during open enrollment. How on earth do human resource teams actually go through and identify their needs of their employee and then prioritize them and to know which ones they're going to give preference to during open enrollment? That seems like it's a big bite of a big whale.
You know, it is. It is. The best thing I can share is solicit feedback. Honestly, conduct surveys with your eligible population. See what went well, see what they like, what they dislike. Hold focus groups. Depending on the structure of your company, consult your department managers, because oftentimes your department managers are going to have a better understanding of their team's specific needs and their challenges than you being in HR. So get their feedback. You know, by combining all of that, the HR team can then gain a comprehensive understanding of what the employees value most, and they can tailor the benefits package accordingly. But lastly, I would also say it never hurts to stay updated on the benefit trends in the industry so you can offer competitive and relevant options for sure.
Wow, so they really do have to look externally to what's happening in the landscape and then look internally to what's going to really match for their population.
You got it. Yep.
That's a lot. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Just a couple, right? Just a couple of things to keep your eye on. I love that you said customer feedback, and your customer, which is probably your employee, right? Your customers are employees, in a way, right? That's how I think of it anyway, right or wrong or indifferent.
That's a good way to think of it.
Right. So you're gathering it. Can you give our audience some tangible examples of how you would take what you gather and incorporate that, or like ways of, or examples of like, hey, I heard of this organization that gathered this feedback from their employees and then did X, Y, and Z. Anything come to mind, or any examples you can highlight for us?
Yeah. So let's see. So once you get that feedback, you're right. What do you do with it? And I would say communicate, open conversations. So when your Ben admin partner reaches out to have that kickoff call, or if you're reaching out to them, just share some of the feedback that you have with them, because you'll be surprised at some of the things that they can do to help promote or address that feedback. So here's a perfect example, and that comes up often. So a measurable goal would be to enhance the participation in, let's say, an ancillary product that requires EOI. The feedback that they got from employees is that although they are interested and excited to enroll in it at first, once they have to then download an EOI form, manually fill it out, mail it back to the carrier, and then wait for the results, or possibly some additional questions or testing needed, that interest is now gone. So from a Ben admin perspective, what I would suggest once you've shared that feedback with us would be, hey, let's add a link into the system, a link to that EOI form. So that way, when the employee completes that enrollment, they can go straight into that EOI form, complete it electronically, and submit it. So that's now taking out part of that reason of why that participation never grows. And it just makes it a lot more user-friendly for the employees.
That makes a ton of sense to me. But I gotta be honest, Shannon, I'm stuck at something you said earlier in the beginning of the podcast episode, which is a perfect or an open enrollment doesn't have to be perfect to be successful.
Correct.
Which immediately makes me think that there are going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be some challenges as we work through these things. And I would love to talk through what maybe some of those challenges look like, or what the maybe most common challenges are, and how, they can impact sustaining those goals that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's a great one, because you're right. A successful enrollment, like I mentioned before, is not necessarily perfect. There is always going to be bumps in the road. The biggest challenge from a Ben admin standpoint is not having information and enough time for us to make adjustments, test, and open the site up for the enrollments to begin. And the reason being is because even though it can be something as small as just a last minute rate change, we need to test. No matter what, we require testing, because you want to make sure that even though it's a small rate change, all eyes have seen it. They know that it's now working as it's expected, and everyone is comfortable opening up for the employees to go in and experience their open enrollment. So that seems to be the biggest challenge. And how we go around that, how you overcome that, is just by being prepared. We set our groups up for success, like I said, from the 90-day reach out all the way to that kickoff call. And if you follow those guidelines with, you have your timeline in place and we're sticking to it, it's going to be a success.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Just preparedness. Start early, review often, and you can avoid the challenge. All right, I think we're all ready to be HR professionals.
It's that easy, right?
I don't think so, but I'm game to live. I apologize.
Yeah. You've done this too long. We know it's not, but we love to pretend. Shannon, I think when I was listening to your response, and again, I love to make parallels to my world. One thing, just a quick comment, is I think if you're looking to make goals or making some strategic changes or to do certain things, one thought comes to mind is, right, I think you said it, like, are there some iterative changes that you can try and implement, right? If it's the baby steps, right? Are there things that we can do that we didn't do last year? We want to improve one or two key metrics. Yeah, there's an ocean to boil over here, and we get that, and we can focus on that. But I think keeping your goals manageable and realistic probably are really, really important, right? And I think that's just, because again, I think we talk about, maybe when someone was listening to your list of all the different things that you could be doing, it might have been overwhelming. So it's like, okay, I'm going to focus on improving this one, or maybe there's two, metrics or goals. And so I'm going to piggyback off that. If you disagree with me, please let me know. I've been wrong many, many times before. It won't be the first or the last. That was more of a comment, so feel free to disagree. But number two, my question leading to it is measurement. So we set these goals with the purpose of, like, we want to achieve these goals. And you gave a couple of examples, but what are the best ways to measure those goals? I know, Shannon, maybe you've seen examples of how HR professionals have, here's my goal, here's how I performed against my goal. What are some of those measurements? And then, I don't know, I'm going to get super nerdy here, but, like, are we throwing these in a spreadsheet? Do you recommend a good visual representation? Who are we trying to convince here that we did a great job, right? Or is it, your CHRO? Is it your CIO? Is it your president? Who cares, and how do they want to consume what you just accomplished, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question there. So for measuring your goals, like, say one of your goals is your enrollment participation. You have an active enrollment. We need to track that. That's how you're going to measure the success of hitting that goal. So then we can provide you with enrollment reports that would go ahead and help you see on a day-to-day basis how many people are logging in and completing their enrollment and how many still have not. So you can track them down and start engaging with them to see why. You can monitor the participation in certain plans. If you have a new plan offering, say a new medical offering, and you want to see, or did our communications work? Are we pushing the people, the employees, into that plan that we wanted to? Well, then we can provide you with plan enrollment reports to let you see, for the new plan year, this is how many people have elected that benefit for you. And I would also say incorporate surveys. At the end of the enrollment experience, just throw in a few questions, just easy ones for them to answer that can give you the feedback on the satisfaction of what the benefit process, looked like was, for them. Those are all metrics that can provide clear insights into the, effectiveness of the benefit experience.
Shannon, let's say that as they're working through actually creating those and measuring these, I'll use a hypothetical. What if an employer suddenly starts to notice that they're not seeing the enrollment numbers that they had set as a goal, that the engagement is not really hitting where they thought it would be? how often should they be reassessing and maybe adjusting some of those enrollment experience goals? And I'm guessing you're going to tell me they shouldn't do it in the middle of open enrollment season, but I could be wrong about that. I mean, how often should they really be doing it? Is it hey, it's a brand new year, we're through open enrollment, let's do an after action report and then go from there? I'm going to stop talking. You tell me what your thoughts are.
I say 3 touches and it's measurable. And 3 touches starting at the end of the previous open enrollment, right, with a rapid review. That's where you just go, you have your presentation. These were your goals. This is how we measured them, how if they were met or not. And then this is what we want to improve upon for the next enrollment season. So it starts right at the end of your previous one. So you can start thinking of how are we going to improve next year. And then summertime, around this time, when we start doing the 90-day reach outs, start reminding the HR teams to start thinking about their changes, start going back to that rapid review of those items that we wanted to focus on to improve upon for this coming season. Do those surveys to get, the feedback from the employees and their managers. And then when you bring that all together, we all have a kickoff call. And that's when you bring in your Ben admin partner and share everything now that you have collected, so that they can help you reinforce those items that are changing, as well as ensure that you have a successful open enrollment. During the enrollment period, it's always good to get those measurable reports to help you determine, do I need to solicit a certain population a little bit more to get their engagement and get them to enroll? But really during that time, that's it. I think all of your true touches on this, the setup of the experience, is going to be beforehand.
I love that. I know that in my own career, I set goals and annual goals, but they do get revisited regularly throughout the year, and they're somewhat dynamic, that they can change and be altered as my career needs. It's actually very refreshing, I think, for not only myself to understand this, but for our HR listeners, to recognize that these goals are dynamic in nature, that they might have some ebb and flow, and that's entirely okay, and to wrap their arms around that.
Yeah, great stuff. And I think we have the sound bite of the episode. 3 touches and it's measurable. Put it on a t-shirt, Shannon. I'm sold.
That's right.
I'll buy one.
It's such good advice. Thank you again, we love this. It's such good dialogue, and thank you for giving really, really good detailed and tangible examples for everyone. I think that's really where the value comes in. So we appreciate that, Shannon. One thing we love to do to end our episodes is, we try to prepare, and our producer does a good job of preparing the questions and dialogue and narrative that we want to make sure and communicate, and for our listeners to grow. But we're not great. We're not always the best at it. And sometimes we forget questions. Dang it. And so if there's anything that you wanted to make sure and share, if there's any tips, any question we didn't answer or ask that you wanted to have answered or get the chance to answer, now's your time. What should we leave our listeners with when it comes to setting employee open enrollment goals?
Sure. Remember that your Ben admin partners, they're there to help you ensure that this is a successful enrollment. So communicate. I can't stress that enough. Keep an open dialogue. Do what you can when you can to connect with your Ben admin partner. Allow the time to set up the system so that it is going to function and look the way that you want it to be. Commit to testing. The more people you have looking at the site, the less likely you'll run into any kind of concerns during the enrollment period. So definitely commit to testing, carve out those couple of days. And we're here to see you through this. HR has millions of things on their plate for open enrollment, so that Ben admin partner is here to help alleviate some of those. And have fun. And that's it.
Well, Shannon, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Please promise us that you will join us again.
Absolutely.
We're going to hold you to it. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into today's episode. If you'd like to leave us a review or share topics that would be of interest, please email us at benefits.buzz@wexinc.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.